Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to do something a little different today. We are going to check out a special selection, which is where one of you tell me what I need to check out. We're going to do something that's not a single track, though. We're going to test something this week, and I believe we have one queued up for next week as well, where I check out an entire EP. Not necessarily as long as a full album, but certainly not a single track either. Today we're going to be kicking it off with a request from Spiro. Awake, Children Under the Moon unfolds as a single cinematic arc, dedicated to anyone who learned how to endure the night before learning how to sleep. The EP captures moments spent awake beneath a distant moon. We have 5 tracks ahead of us here for only 22 minutes. I do believe we'll be diving into these one by one. I don't think they run into each other at all. So let's kick it and see what the band Cissné is bringing to the table today. Yeah, so we are in 4, broken up into 3-3-2. Like the drum, we had the sound of water running on the sides previously. As beautiful and delicate as the guitars are, it's interesting the contrast with the harshness of the vocals. Oh man, such sharp contrast there. The synchronized duality of the 2 guitar lines. Bass laying down pedal tones underneath it all. And the ghost notes on the drums. Simple complexity. Very interesting. There's also a highly digital sound to that. Those harmonies were perfect. Oh. Yeah, what a way to kick off an album. What a way to kick off an album. Contrast, dynamics. These are the things that stand out to me, and probably to you as well, clearly as a key component of this track. Whether it is right off the bat, the twinkly guitars, the delicateness of the smallness of the guitar tones, but also the brightness and higher pitch choices there versus the raspy and raw vocal delivery. Even the drums at the start have a delicate element to them. The drummer's not smashing this drum kit. Certainly hitting it with force, there's volume to it, but it isn't absolutely destroying it. There is tenderness to that as well. The beginning of this song has delicate instrumentation and incredibly harsh vocals. This high contrast is continually explored throughout the track. We have this high energy section as the drums begin to grow into something chorus-like, where the guitars get louder and lower in pitch. The drummer begins to hit the drums louder. The vocalist keeps doing what the vocalist does, and then eventually all that energy is wiped out, and we have a spoken word whispered section with the vocals and an incredibly low energy instrumental bit. This high contrast between the energy, the intensity of these two sections. We continue to explore this as the song reaches these peaks and then brings it back down. All of this escalating into the midpoint of the track. We have a little bit of energy coming from the instrumentation, and it is paired with wispy, airy, clean vocals. And then this takes us back to the chorus, and we just have an incredibly intense finale that I think is more intense because of where we came from, because of having those wispy, airy vocals just prior to it. This entire song is predicated on taking two extremes and smashing them together, either simultaneously or one right after another. Why can't I think of that word? That's going to irritate me. Consecutively, that's not the word I want. Sequentially? I don't think that's it either. Anyways, I don't know what word I'm thinking of, but you get the idea. Two contrasting ideas, make sure the audience hears them together in one way, shape, or form. Now, the atmosphere of this track, I find this pretty neat because the song started off kind of math rocky with the twinkling guitars, definitely a little bit of that Midwest emo vibe in there, but focusing more on melodic ideas and how the melody of two different concepts can play off of each other. The guitars I mentioned were kind of doing their own thing, but also showcasing the same feeling and atmosphere. And this was creating complexity through the duality of this. A shared duality. Where's I going with this? Oh, yeah. So we have this like Midwest emo thing going on, a little bit of math rock, but I noticed when I checked back into the song to specifically what the guitars were doing towards the end, I began to recognize that we've moved away from those ideas and landed on something closer to what I would call post-rock. I think part of why the ending is as large as it is one part because of the vocal contrast, but also because the guitars have shifted away from melodic ideas to textured ideas. This was present throughout the track, but I don't think that they're textured concepts. They're chords primarily through the lens of effects pedals, amplification, distortion, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't quite as intense. It never hit the peak until the final part of the song. And at this point, we have the combination of the vocal contrast with a peak of instrumental atmospheric creation. It's really interesting to hear this song kind of dance between these two realms, something more melodically focused versus something more texturally or atmospherically focused. Usually bands will excel at one of the two. If they do excel at both, they will typically try to smash them together, putting melody alongside atmosphere. And for this track, at least, we still have 4 ahead of us, we saw segmenting of it, atmosphere at times, melody at other times, twinkling writing in some places, chordally driven in others. This is paired with the bass, which primarily did a lot of pedal tone throughout, really allowing the low end to be a supporting structure for everything else to be built on. So we have this sort of mix of genres here, and it's neat. Like I said, it's interesting to hear these two ideas not try to be worked together, but just alternating between them. What they do, though, is, as far as I can hear, create something that sounds emotionally heavy. That's what I get out of most of this. And I think that the twinkling guitar stuff at the beginning of the track, while it does pop up in places later, is designed to create a beauty to be smashed. Every time that I get into one of these atmospheres, and I love the twinkling guitar work, I am crushed by the weight not too long after. It's some sort of false comfort that exists here, and its purpose is to lead the listener into this false safety, or to create a beautiful atmosphere to be destroyed. That the contrast is the purpose, because I rarely feel joyful or calm in any of this track despite these moments. Well, I take that back. The beginning was rather calm, and then I got caught off guard, and then I had my guard up the next time we were in this moment, because I figured we were going to return to some really heavy guitar work and some screaming eventually, that this was going to be short-lived. And sure enough, that is how this song tends to work. A majority of it is in the heavier, more abrasive writing. And that heaviness, that grittiness, that gnarliness to the guitar tones, to the vocals that dominate these sections, that's all I get out of it. There's not a lot of harmonic information in here. It's just kind of a gnarly, heavy moment. Where we do get some strong harmonic writing that isn't in a beautifully calming section is in the section with the clean vocals. We had a little bit of, I would say, neutral positivity, a type of vulnerability possibly, but as we got through this section, it turned darker and darker, as if this vulnerability were being abused. That's not the word I want, but I think it gets the idea across. Taken advantage of, I think, is what I'm looking for. And at the very end of it, the vocalist ends on a note that, I mean, it immediately grabbed me. I don't remember what my reaction was to it. I remember being verbal about it, but I don't think I spoke directly about that note. But it ends on complete instability. There is no resolution there. In fact, for the chord progression of this section, we went through generally parts of instability back to resolution. We had a pretty typical chordal movement here. And instead of finishing on that resolved chord like we have been, we finish on something incredibly tense. And then move into the screaming, into the final section of this track. Once again, something that feels like it should be somewhat comfortable in some way, especially compared to some of the heavier parts of this track, and that ends up being betrayed. We're put in this situation to undercut it. And so most of this track ends up just feeling incredibly gnarly and leaving me in a state of distrust. Every good moment is destroyed. And that's a wild idea, because we don't even get to stay in the good moments for too long. They're literally there for the rug pull, for the contrast. Or at least that's my read on it. I suppose the last thing we need to bring up, and kind of want to wait a little bit because I'm pretty sure this is just how it's going to be this whole time, but I'm going to bring it up now, is the vocals. They're ear-catching. I don't know if shocking is the right word. I think they match the general vibe and feeling of this track in most places, but they are incredibly raw, for the most part. The harsh vocals is raw through most of this. There is a pain, there is an anxiety, there is a cry for help that just pierces through that. Every single syllable, I can feel that in. It's the way that there's shrieks almost, as if there's some almost like whistle overtone on top of the compression that comes through at times. It's the way the breath is incorporated in places that don't really seem thought out. It's just as if the vocalist wanted to keep screaming, and then at one point they realized, well, I can't keep this up. I need to take a breath here, and it's not the greatest place. It's kind of awkward rhythmically, but this is just where it has to be. As if breathing isn't their first priority, it's getting this information out. There is a recklessness to it that typically I associate, especially with this type of pain, of urgency. And I am a sucker for this type of, not just the sound of it, but also this type of theatric, almost acting component of not just saying the words, but applying them to a character. That character may be themselves. Everything in here may be entirely self-referential, and the lyricist literally goes through this and they're just speaking from the heart. But, you know, it could also just be a character they've created and they want to portray the characteristics of this character through the performance. Regardless, this comes up every time there's a sort of theatric vocal performance. I'm always a sucker for this. To inject the emotions into the delivery is a surefire way to get me interested in music. And so I'm sold here, but there's also the contrast to this. We can't get away from the concept of contrast. There's spoken word here, but it's weird. If the harsh vocals are characterized by raw and authentic, the clean vocals are characterized by digital and inauthentic. When I listen to the breathiness of them, it almost doesn't feel real. There's no lead up or lead out to the breathy sounds. There is, when you breathe, there's a high point into a low point. None of that happens here. And when a syllable starts, you're at full breathiness. It's almost as if the vocalist starts with the breath and then sings the words so that you're at full breath. And the same is at the end where it's just the full breath and then cut off. And then the engineer can just strip off the opening and closing parts and just get the sung part that's at full breathiness or airiness. It sounds inhuman. That's just not the way this would sound if it were done naturally. It sounds digitally altered. And I think a lot of that comes down to the staticness of this sound. But the pitches themselves are also perfected too. There is a lot of pitch correction going on in here. Not enough to really give it that robotic sound, but enough to be heard. Especially in contrast to the incredibly raw, harsh vocals in here. There's just a lot of digital touching up on it. And as far as I can read it, it's an intentional decision to create sharp contrast between these two. I would not be surprised if the lyrics here were supposed to be understood sarcastically, ironically, with hidden intent, something along those lines. There is a veil disguising the truth in this moment, at least sonically. And it is designed to be heard. Nothing in here is subtle. For a while, I actually thought this was a Vocaloid because it captures all the qualities of that. But I think it's just a little too human for that. Now, there might be a Vocaloid out there that just absolutely sounds humanistic. But the Vocaloids I've listened to, which admittedly I think is maybe a total of 3 Vocaloids, I've just not heard that. There's that distinct quality of digitalness to them. But this does kind of err towards that. Recording human vocals and doing your best to get them approximately like the way Vocaloids sound. And I think that's interesting to create this feeling of inauthenticity. Inauthenticity. I could not figure out where to put the stress on that. To the vocal delivery to contrast the incredibly raw and authentic vocals that permeate this track. Let me check out some lyrics for this one. I wish I could find hand translated lyrics for this because, well, it's a running theme today. If you checked out my Elephant Gym track that we checked out just a little bit ago, I also ran into the same problem there. These machine learning translations they're not great. There's a lot of nuance in this one that I think I'm losing, something lost through translation. The metaphor is not quite coming through. I do, though, get a general feeling of nostalgia for childhood specifically, but just generally the comfort and safety that this person experienced earlier in life that they don't anymore. The final lines of this track says, I grew up. I was relieved that I didn't have to go back, for there was no place to go back to. And now I'm sad. That this place that gave them comfort and safety, something that they wish they could return to, doesn't actually exist anymore. Maybe physically, maybe their home was sold. Maybe it was the people in the home who aren't with them anymore. But beyond that, it's also memories. You can't go back to a memory. You can return to a place where a memory was formed, but that place doesn't necessarily still have to be or represent the things you felt while you were there, or that you remember while you were there, when you were there. The safety and the comfort don't exist for our narrator anymore, and that makes them sad. Now, the opening of this is a long ramble. This track, lyrically, is not presented with stanzas. It is one long stanza. It is still poetic in that there's multiple lines, they're not finished with punctuation, and line breaks happen randomly. But it's also just like a long run-on sentence. There's nothing to break it up into verses or choruses or even stanzas. It is just one long list of 50 lines. Through that lens, the translation ends up feeling more like being told a story than sung a song or read poetry. The first group of sentences, it says, I waited for the shooting star. I waited for it to fall. It was so daunting. You said it would be better if I fell first. Someone else said, you're just a poor child. They said my plastered on smile was creepy, a little strange. I suppose so. Hey, teacher, tell me, how far back do I have to go to get that pure white life that one day I will hate more than anyone else? That your dark eyes painted over the night no longer see me. Their outlines blurred even amidst the mingling traffic lights, and only your voice was clear. You would cry when I held your hand, and you trembled, but when I held your hand on that snowy day, how much I loved you. I'll be back soon. It's interesting just how many emotions are slam-packed into this, and this is probably only a quarter of the lyrics. It jumps around between so many ideas, the joys of being with this other person, the valleys of being with this other person, the bullying that our narrator received by random people, the feeling of being lost, of not seeing the person that they always enjoyed being around, only having their voice to go on. It's little intimate things about them and their environment. A variety of interactions with different people in this environment, but still generally what it looks at. We come back to the idea of the shooting star. It says that they waited for it to fall. They thought that it might make things easier for mom and dad, though now they understand that that hope was really nothing more than a fairy tale. But children never really have a choice in not believing those. It says when it used to storm real bad, they would always listen to the mini disc player that they had hidden away in the back of a drawer, that this became a room without a lock, a place to protect. I think this is interesting. It describes a physical place, but I think ultimately it means an emotional one. The mini disc player would play music, presumably. And they're talking about how even when things were not great, using the metaphor of a gnarly storm outside, that they could retreat to music, and they wanted to capture this place, this calm that existed within a storm. But they don't know how to. They say, tell me how to protect this place. Reality, it's like circulating blood. It just keeps piling up like a dusty Bible. Something that should protect you, but can't. It gets old, gets frail. It's a very interesting track that speaks of lost innocence, but also lost joy. About how, through the lens of growing up, life just isn't quite what they assumed it would be. It's not just about the loss of innocence, but kind of about the loss of meaning, of purpose. Growing up means coming to terms with the realities of life, the less glamorous realities of life. But in this case, it's also about the loss of the joy of childhood. Usually adulthood is the balance. Childhood is mostly fun, mostly joy, peaches and gravy. Adulthood, though, is mix. More highs, more lows, balancing everything out. But that balance doesn't come from our narrator. They just get the lows of adulthood, and they want to go back to something that they know they can't, which I think is its own tragedy. This can't even be a song about an adventure to return to something, because our narrator is cursed with the knowledge that there is no journey to be had. And that just brings them down even further. Heavy track to start this off. Real heavy track. And you know, when you listen to those words and remember that the vocalist is screaming with urgency, recklessly, it elevates it. It really, to me, it brings that emotion home. Track 2 is called Stray Sheep. Really big blown out guitars here, very strict drum work. The harmonic tension with the guitars here. really interesting guitar part here. Parts of it almost sound like a vibraphone more than a guitar. This, I think, is the intended tempo, but there's that triplet that's a bit faster. Yeah, a good expansion of what they explored with Home, kind of going for the inverse of it, where this one used calmer sections more frequently and allowed the larger sections to be the peaks from that, to be the exception, to create this grit and this noise and something that is generally palatable and listenable. It makes these moments stand out, not by ripping away, oh, dude, I forgot about that. I was talking about how the in track one, that the lighter, more palatable sections were short-lived, almost there exclusively to pull the rug out from under you and remind you that you can't have that. And the entire song is about wanting something you can't have. That lines up really well. Anyways, this one we have the inverse of that. We're supposed to sit within these quieter, more docile moments for longer bits of time so that when we hit those gnarly sections, they have more impact. This is very important for this album. I mean, it works within the song as well, but I think particularly within the framework of the album, to have basically sat at a 10 for the entire first 20% of the album, to immediately dip the energy down a little bit and create contrast through that. And it is quite effective. Whenever those vocals came in, especially at the end of the track, I guess towards the middle of the track, when we kicked in with the tremolo guitar work, kind of going for that gazy atmosphere style, yeah, dude, that was gnarly. You could feel the build up into it as well. Unlike track one, which primarily focused on harsh transitions, snapping back and forth between the two, we had build-ups and letdowns on this one. Things had a bit more of a fluid movement, even if the ideas themselves were sharply juxtaposed. And I think that generally speaking, this is a good second track to follow up from the first one with. On the other side of things, though, it really isn't that different from the first track. We have guitars that through a lot of this give us these twinkly melodic ideas that allow the song to feel spacious and empty, while the vocalist does their screaming thing throughout these. We had a lot of harsh vocals in soft, quiet sections throughout the first half of this track, but we also had some more kind of spoken word stuff. We had clean singing stuff as well. Had a bit more vocal variety on this track. The drums continuing on with what they're doing, giving us some more complex ideas, but always with a dash of simplicity to them. That is to say that usually the more complex ideas are transition concepts to introduce ghost notes or polyrhythmic ideas towards the end of a phrase to help pull us into the next concept or into the repetition of the phrase. Just a way to kind of break things up and put a punctuation at the end before we go back to the beginning or move on. And the bass is basing. I didn't hear as many more complex lines like we saw in the first one. This one felt a bit more reserved from the bass, though there was that one really nice bass line in the middle of the track that I quite enjoyed. I do hope that we get to hear more of the bass work going forward, but honestly, if a lot of it is just on the simpler side to lay down the foundation for everything else to be built upon, as we have seen throughout this first 40% of this album, that's going to be just fine as well, because honestly, I think a lot of this kind of sits in that post-rock field of craft an atmosphere and allow the vocals to tell a story through that, to use the emotional writing in the music as a jumping off board into the performance. And I think that's where they're really excelling at. They have cool bass lines every once in a while. We have the twinkling guitars. Every once in a while, there's more complex drum work in places. But for the most part, this is simple and effective. How do we create this emotion, this atmosphere with the least amount of moving parts, going for concise writing rather than overly complex writing? And, you know, I can always get behind that kind of efficiency. It is usually an underappreciated composition style, but efficient writing is very clean. And I think they're getting away with that on this album in places. We do have one rather big change here at the end, though. I don't remember hearing any tremolo sort of gazy stuff on the first track, and I do think it is a key component to why the end of this track hits the way it does. We had this nice quiet section, the guitars start to rise in volume, we rise in escalating harmony as well, the vocalist starts to push towards a scream, and then we're in that moment and you can feel the tension building and the walls are closing in, and then you just hit that moment and the vocals are doing their pained scream, absolutely wonderful still, and the guitars are just gnarly. There's so much noise and texture to them, aside from whatever notes they're playing, the feedback, the distortion, the static, the white noise, all of this, the amplification is creating such a gritty texture to this track. And then they are applying less stable dyads between the two guitars too, which is just creating even more levels of tension. And it's all played against this vocalist moving from clean singing into this incredibly gnarly screaming, as if trying to fight back against this sound that is attempting to envelop them. So yeah, very well done, taking some of the ideas from the first track and viewing a few through a different lens while just expanding on some of the ideas that seem to be what they do well, which is noise, discomfort, and pain. I'll be very surprised if any of the next 3 tracks focus on anything other than what we've seen here as a primary focus, but I don't think that what we listen to in the next few tracks is going to be identical to what we've listened to here. They're just finding different ways to explore this sort of pained disillusion. Speaking of disillusion, let's hit some lyrics and see what they're going to be talking about this time. We have another song that is about feeling stuck. This time, though, instead of stuck in an ephemeral state of now, of sadness, we have one where this person is stuck physically. Someone says, "Let's go to Coney Island, the amusement park." Our narrator then looks at the sky as it peeks through the gap in the curtains and realizes it's almost pitch black here. Unable to break free from anywhere, I don't think I'll ever leave this country. Under the control of chance and fate, What should the sheep pretending to be calm do? We have a person who wants to explore so much outside of where they are, but lack the means to do so, saying that fate and chance both dictate their life, and neither are giving them any sort of flexibility in their decision making. It says, where am I heading? I keep having nightmares. Lately, I've been appeased by vague violence. The phrase, see you later. How many more times? Just sliding down an unbroken circle, I felt like I was moving forward. I wanted to feel that way. The rain keeps falling, and every time I search for the meaning of goodbye, I count the good nights you gave me and fall asleep. So I cover these slowly melting days with sweet dreams. My cells will peel away, and I will soon disappear. I have to go over the fence and run through a vastness that allows me to get lost. My eyes reflect the colors that change in an instant, even painting the blue bruises that float. Not a single one of you is tainted. So I can leave you all behind now. I open the window and a lukewarm breeze comes in. Let's go to the next town. Tomorrow will take us beyond that. Countless particles dance and shine. A general feeling of being stuck here, of the phrase, see you later, being a type of violence. Maybe not necessarily in the fact that they will return, but in the fact that they are leaving at all. As they say later, that they search for the meaning of goodbye, trying to find something deeper in the disconnect between people. All they want to do, though, is to go somewhere that they don't know. It says they need to run through a vastness that allows them to get lost. Maybe tomorrow they'll go to the next town. It's a start, isn't it? Not a lot of distance, but somewhere unfamiliar at the very least. The next track is called Water Lily. Let's dive in. Absolutely leaning into the bittersweet nostalgia, a longing for something, but also remembering the goodness of it too. Vocals as instruments? Feels like floating. Despite the heaviness of the atmosphere, I think it's this guitar right here and the lightness of the vocals of just gently moving through this harsh environment. All right, that was fun. A little bit of a jazzier chord progression there. Remember this moment. I'm going to talk about it later. That is some crazy distortion. You can still hear it fizzling and popping. Dang. All right. So that moment I asked y'all to remember, something clicked in me. And for the briefest of moments, I thought to myself, this is kind of blackened. And it is. I don't think I've been tricked into listening to black metal, but I do think that there is some particularly Blackgaze component to this track. And maybe to this album in general too, although I think we're really starting to lean into it on this one. There has been some very shrill, harsh vocals in here. I hear them through the lens of post-hardcore vocals. I don't think they quite have that metallic element to them. And this is one of those things I just feel in my gut. I don't have a way to quantify what makes a metal scream versus a punk adjacent scream. But it is something I just kind of feel. And I think this is interesting because it poses a middle point. The vocals don't change on this track. The cleans are the same airy cleans that we've heard this entire time, and the harshes are still the painful, heartbreaking ones. But for whatever reason, in this moment, I thought, these are pretty close to depressive black metal harshes. They might even be. It doesn't matter what classification we put them under, but it does help me to understand some more stuff that I don't, things that I take for granted. Once that clicked, then I realized that the guitars are doing tremolo picking, creating atmosphere through, well, harmonic movement primarily. It's a lot of held out notes, but instead of holding it out, you're just going to continue to play it rapidly. This is the shoegaze approach, but it's also black metal approach. The only thing really missing here is some blast beats. I find that to be interesting because I don't think it's the blast beats exclusively that separate this from a more pure black metal. But there's a lot in the crossover here. The Venn diagram between, I don't know, emotionally aggressive post-hardcore and black metal / blackgaze. There's more in this overlap than I expected. And it's kind of tough for me to, through this lens, begin to pick them apart. It makes me wonder then what that X factor is, that thing that I can't point towards, that clearly separates this. Like I said, if you put blast beats under this, you're one step closer, but I still don't know that I would classify this as black metal. It's got too much other in it, too much rock, too much punk. But what parts of the song, what parts of the composition would be classified in them that would balance this equation out. The fact that I don't know means that there's stuff still to learn, both about some of my favorite styles of music and about one of my least favorite styles of music. It might even help me enjoy black metal a bit more once I find out what that is. I found that to be a really interesting conclusion to draw there. Now, as for what this song is doing, it is very clearly copying off or bouncing off of Stray Sheep track 2. We are focusing more on lighter ideas to have stark contrast when we bring in the harsh vocals, when we bring in the heavier layers. Not much has changed there. Home is still our most aggressive track so far, and these other two have focused on a lighter side. This one, once again, kind of focusing on a little bit of that nostalgic sound, a mixing of both the longing and the negativity, the sorrow of looking towards the past of something you've had, something you're wanting, but also the positivity of remembering those times. It's the duality of that. To remember something wonderful and to wish you could re-experience that. Especially if we can view any of this under a singular umbrella and assume that these kinds of feelings are associated with track 1's lyrics about wanting to return back to that safety of childhood, but knowing you can't. That's another track that, while I felt it less so in the composition, I certainly found in the lyrics this longing for the past and the sorrow that comes with that. But what this song does different is noise. Yeah, it stands out a little bit in this one. We certainly have more of a noisier post-hardcore thing going on here. A lot of the guitar work still veers towards that, the Midwest emo twinkling stuff, and then the shoegaze texture-based strumming. As we got further into the end of the track, I really thought we had found our peak, about a minute and a half left to go, and we hit this immense section where the vocals are going and there's so much noise and distortion and harmonic dissonance, very much like the end of track 2, except this wasn't the peak to the track. We had traditional noise rock showing up after this, with the guitars just kind of making sounds. Not really focusing on melody or even harmonic structure, dissonant or consonant, just filling space with sounds. This was easily the most tense and least enjoyable part of this album for me, and as we continue to get through, we have seen an escalation of these moments, where I found track 1 to be rather palatable from the lens of a post-hardcore track that incorporates a little bit of math rock to it. Not math rock, emo to it. Stray Sheep pushed more into an incredibly tense and dissonant ending. This one takes that idea, gives it to us a little early, and then pushes into raw sound. Every one of these tracks is ending on a more and more tense finale. I wonder then if we're going to continue to see this growth. Maybe Will and Doors, tracks 4 and 5, have even softer moments in the track, but that they will end on increasingly escalating finales. If so, this album's going to be an interesting one for me subjectively, because I do enjoy a lot of what's going on here and I really connect with the vocal delivery, but these endings are anything but something that I would find enjoyable. Something that happened here, and I probably should have brought up in track 2, and it just completely slipped my mind, is the layered vocals approach. Putting cleans underneath harshes. Track 2 layered them in a harmonizing way where they sang the exact same thing. Track 3, though, separates them. The cleans get pushed out to the side, and as far as I can tell, they're doing vocalizations, do's or da's, something along that line. At least I heard a D sound of consonant sound there. And they're just doing these rhythmic melodic ideas while the vocals in the center are screaming. And we have this dual thing going on here. Technically a form of counterpoint possibly, except I'd say that the clean vocals are not ostinato, well, they are ostinatos, but they're ornamental ideas. more so than linear melodies. So I don't know if I'd necessarily call it a counterpoint, but certainly having two vocals doing their completely own thing is something that we hadn't really seen elsewhere on this album. And I think this is another interesting escalation as well. Track 1 was only ever single vocals. Track 2 has double vocals, but they're both on one idea. Track 3 is double vocals, but they're both on their own idea. We have this a pattern of multiple voices, voices being one of the more human sounds that you can create in music. Something that most people are going to easily connect with, or at least more easily than instrumentation. And we have singularity, duality, and then separated duality, where they're both doing their own thing. It's an interesting pattern to see. It may not represent or mean anything. I mean, I've mentioned this before. Album track listing is usually one of the last things that happens, unless it's a concept album where the story needs to be in a specific order. Usually the songs are written out of the order that we end up getting them in. So it could be something that is entirely unintentional, but it is a cool little pattern to be found within the album structure. Let's hit some lyrics. Once again, a short poem. This one even shorter than the others, which is interesting because it's the longest track thus far. Seems to have the least amount of lyrics to it. I'm just going to read this whole paragraph and then we'll discuss it. It says, "You are a softly whispering diva. The gently opening night illuminates us both, but it's just an illusion. Every time I beg for love, we melt together, our lives flickering and burning. Unable to utter any words, you hold me tight, but I hide myself. I can become the me that you haven't seen. Just listen, the sound of my breathing crumbles. I leave the room filled with love behind and become the me that belongs only to you. Lily has long since governed my heart. Her dazzling whiteness and fleeting fragrance fade away. Don't go anywhere. Our promise will surely last forever, more beautiful than any planet. Beyond my imagination, I hear a hallucination. Requiem aeternum. No words are needed. Held tightly in your arms, I hear only our breath." So we have two people trapped in, not necessarily trapped, found themselves in sort of a liminal space. The one, our narrator, completely head over heels for the other. They don't believe that they are worthy, though, to be in this relationship. They consistently talk about being something more, not necessarily more for themselves, but more for the other. As stated, I can become the me that you haven't seen, the me that belongs only to you. To transform into this, they will fill the room with love. What I find interesting through all of this is that it says they hear a hallucination, requiem aeternum. The eternal rest, usually a prayer given for people in purgatory to find their way to rest, to the afterlife. It's an interesting phrase to toss in this track, given that everything else is simply about two people presumably in love with each other. The end of it states, no words are needed. I'm just held tightly in your arms, and we can only hear each other's breath. And yet, just prior to that, they hear a hallucination at that, a voice that may not even be real. Requiem aeternum is what it says. It's an interesting detail to put in there, and I don't know how to interpret it other than the fact that maybe this isn't real. I doubt it's supposed to be understood through the lens of two spirits found each other in purgatory, but I think we can certainly jump off from that metaphor. And what though? That's where I find myself kind of running up against the wall. What would be a more physical version of being in purgatory with someone, finally finding the person you want to be with, finding that joy, that happiness, that comfort, but you're stuck between realms. They seem to find comfort here. Maybe that's it. They're stuck between their past and their future, and in the moment they find some fleeting joy within a relationship that gives them the comfort they used to feel when they were younger. Maybe. If that's the lens, though, then there is that little bit of sadness underpinning this whole thing, that they understand this is fleeting. It is transient between two states, that eventually this will have to end. That's the only read I can get from that. That certainly matches the music of this, because there really isn't anything in here other than the self-loathing that has any sort of negativity to it. And the self-loathing absolutely dominates this set of lyrics as well. Which is interesting too. I'm not going to assume this is all a concept album, but it does thematically line up with some of the stuff from Home. Realizing that this place used to give comfort, but might not now, and might not have ever only exclusively done that. A feeling of mixing positive and negative emotions with, in the case of track 1, a place, but in the case of track 3, a person. Interesting. I really, if anybody can read Japanese and they're well versed at translating into English, maybe not necessarily literally, but to capture the essence of it and get the nuance of metaphor through, I would be absolutely indebted if you took a jab at these 5 tracks and compiled some better English translations. I feel like there's so much depth here that I'm missing. I get the gist of it, but the nuance is sadly not there. The lyrics are on their Bandcamp page, cissnejapan.bandcamp.com. I'll probably just toss that in the description box. Like I said, I would greatly appreciate that, because I want to get more in depth on this. All right, track 4, the longest one, 5.5 minutes. Let's kick it.
1月29日、最低気温マイナス6度の予報。温かい紅茶をポットに詰めて、君はきっと薄着だろうから、マフラーとブランケット、カイロを持って約束の場所へ。しかし君は現れなかった。何か間違えた。ずっと間違えていた。紙切れになった切符はあの木の下に埋めた。明日、僕もそこへ。1月27日、死神がやってきた。そういえばかくれんぼは昔から下手くそだった。ごめんね、もう会えないや。君を利用したの、誰でもよかったね。忘れてね、全部忘れて生きてね。8月5日、コンビニにあの子を見かけた。こんな暑い。
We have 3 voices now. The pattern continues. And they come together for this triad stack. Gorgeous. The beauty of the piano too. We haven't had the piano before. And this is the rubber band snapping back too. Water Lily was the noisiest part of this album. I went from all this tension to this melancholic beauty. And the suspended moment there before crashing down. The dual layers there. But short-lived, too. Yeah, I've heard this one. Forgot about that ending. Although, to be fair, it took me a while. A lot of it felt familiar enough. But I actually had to look it up. We checked this out on live stream a couple of weeks ago, and my positive reaction to it is actually what caused Spiro to do this special selection. But I totally forgot about that ending. It makes sense though. If we follow the patterns, this song is probably one of the softest that we've heard so far. As I mentioned, Water Lily, and actually this kind of continues on. Home stretches pretty far, Stray Sheep snaps it back and stretches even further. Water Lily snaps back, then stretches even further, and now Will snaps even further back. More consonant starts, larger, more explosive and noisy finales. If we graphed out the entire album, the structure of it, we've kind of got some nice peaks and valleys at the beginning, but as we go through the album, the peaks and valleys get even larger. It is absolutely wild how big of a gap is between what is an incredibly docile and gorgeous and bittersweet. It is melancholic, but still a gorgeous start to this track into the whirlwind of chaos that happens in the finale. It takes the noisy element that we saw at the ends of track 2 and 3 and, as I've been indicating, pushes that even further. This is just tremolo picking on a incredibly large guitar with so much noise and distortion and clipping, and it's so low too. We haven't really heard a lot of low-end guitar on this. I'd say that even in the heavier parts of this album, it's been more mid-range than low-range. I'll be honest though, that ending I did not enjoy. It comes out of nowhere, but so much of this track captures what I love about this band. It's the high contrast. It's the incredibly effective harsh vocals here at portraying pain. It's the use of, in this case, a little less common, but the Royal Road chord progression, which is really good at capturing and portraying nostalgia. It's a double-edged sword. It's the sorrow and the joy with a tad bit of longing. This chord progression, it's to me, I can pick it up pretty much anywhere. When I hear it, I'm like, that's it. I don't remember the exact qualities of it. I don't remember what the progression itself is as far as mode or chord names go, but I can absolutely pick it up. I can hear it. And it's always that feeling of like immense sorrow with longing and some joy. And this album's been using it well, but I think this is where it really clicked. And I was like, yeah, that's it, 100%. And it was in the opening clean section. And the vocals, I think the vocal melody really gives it away. Yeah, I do think that we still have one track to go, but I think that so far this is the track I probably would have picked if I was on the other side of the screen having to pick something to show a reactor. This would be it. It captures more of the melodic writing than I think any of the other tracks does. It captures the melancholy a lot better, while still having moments of joy and beauty within it. And the screams are well done. I think Home is still the best showcase for the vocal screaming, but this is a good one to showcase the vocal balance. It also has three-way harmony on it, which is gorgeous. This is the most harmonically dense track of the album so far. And I think that in the middle, right before the noise comes in at the end, I think that is just a phenomenal section as far as emotion and energy are concerned. And it is incredibly affecting. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I typically find it difficult to physically, emotionally react to music with lights and camera. I find myself tearing up or even crying with similar music on my own. I don't know if it's that subconsciously I know there's an audience here even though there's no one around me, or maybe it's just the lights make things more difficult. Maybe it's the fact that I am in a more analytical state when I am reacting to music rather than when I'm listening to it casually. But for whatever reason, I don't really tear up as much as I do in my regular listening. But I guarantee when I spin this album again, and I probably will, minute 2.5 to 3 in this track is going to wreck me. I already see it happening. This is the most, for an album that is clearly focused on human emotion, I think this is the most emotional moments of the album so far. And it's crazy just how powerful it is. And it's tremolo picking, some straightforward drumming, pedal tone, bass, and vocal screaming. Like there's not a lot of complexity here, but it's all how it's delivered to the ears, which honestly is a lot on the production side. It's the creation of the guitar tone, it's the creation of the vocal timbre, it's the creation of the compression on the vocals, and the way that it's all mixed together in post. Absolutely something that I think is much greater than the sum of its parts. We have another track that plays off of this idea of two people where one is incredibly self-conscious and maybe even full of, well, actually definitely full of self-pity and shame. They don't view themselves as being good enough. And in fact, in parts of this, we may even find that they don't view themselves as good at all. We kick it off, the spoken word part says Boy A's diary. The forecast is for a minimum temperature of -6 Celsius. So I filled a teapot with warm tea. You'll probably be lightly dressed, so I brought a scarf and a blanket and a hand warmer. But you didn't show up. Did I do something wrong? Have I been wrong all along? This ticket I hold in my hand, now just a piece of paper, so I buried it under the tree, and I'll go there tomorrow too. Then it says Girl A's diary. This one kicks off with the Grim Reaper came today. Wild way to start a diary entry. From here, though, I don't know where the diary entry is supposed to end and the song is supposed to begin proper, in a sense. We have some shifting perspectives in here, and some of the pronouns don't line up, assuming we are talking about a boy and a girl. So I don't know how properly to interpret this. I'm just going to shift most of this into being much like the narrator of Water Lily and Stray Sheep, someone who doesn't have the best opinion of themselves but still wants to be with someone who will give them comfort. This one, though, is more hard on themselves than any of the others that we've seen. It says, "I'm sorry, we can't meet again, but I used you. Anyone would have been fine, but just forget about it all and live on." Says, "I'll love you even more tomorrow," is what I said, but it was a lie. Even so, I wish I could be by their side. I have a feeling, though. I run up and I'm waiting all of this time. Just expose me, gaze at me, see right through me. I'm weak and dirty. I want to cry and cling to you, but know that I can't stand anymore, so kill me. Kill this illusion, this inferiority, the secrets, the envy, the lust. I'm just alone. What am I doing? I'm so scared of everything. Spring, though, will pick us up. You probably wouldn't understand, though. But uncover me. Find it. I want you to see right through me. See that I'm cunning and ugly. Hold me and don't let go. But know that we'll never meet again. Despite that, love me. I fall asleep without noticing, and you blame me. Hell, I invade myself. I erase it all so quickly, and you can erase it too. Just let go. Run away. Help me. I'm sorry. Spring will come to pick us up, and I won't be afraid anymore. It's beautiful in its humanity and the rawness of it, but also in the fallibility of our narrator. We have seen this throughout these tracks where they've just generally been one-sided. Someone who wants love but doesn't feel that they themselves deserve it. Someone who wants comfort but doesn't feel they'll ever get it. Very one-dimensional ideas. But here we have someone who's a bit more fleshed out. We're seeing more of them. They aren't just self-loathing, but they aren't just self-loathing. They also want to be loved, but they're pushing this person away because they don't want to infect them. They don't want to taint them. They view themselves as unlovable, but wanting love. But loving another person enough that their selfish actions are seen as a negative and trying to push this other person away as to not allow them to be taken advantage of. It is both selfish and selfless simultaneously in an incredibly contradictory manner. I think the end of this really sets that straight. It says, just forget everything. Let go of me. Run away from me, but also help me. All of this back to back. It's incredibly human. And I love that. It's gorgeous. And this part in the middle, I think, is another great capturing of this. That, I want you to see through me. I want you to see that I'm ugly. But I want you to hold on to me and never let go. Even though we'll never see each other again. But I still want you to love me. Conflicting wants. Struggling against emotional needs. Butting heads against selfish versus selflessness. Needing this emotional connection, but loving the other person enough to push them away from you because of the ways you feel about yourself. It is incredibly real. I don't think it comes through clearly. I skipped a lot of lines that I don't think worked well within this interpretation of the lyrics. Once again, I'm just going to blame the machine learning translation of this. It just isn't great. But as usual, I can see this thought peering through the general themes of this, even though I don't get the nuance of all of it. Let's wrap this up. Our final track is called Doors. Let's see how they finish this album off. So we have Morse code and whispering. Could be a little less creepy. Yeah, I actually like the slower tempo. Yeah, that feels right. It's like some glitch static over here. So we had some slightly jazzy ideas at the end of track 4. Kind of bringing them back a little bit here. Oh. The bass is tearing it up on this track. Really given the space to excel. Very interesting. My snapback theory is complete. This is the most beautiful consonant music that we've had all album. The beginnings of each track gets even lighter. Now, interestingly, this did not follow through with the other half of my theory that the ends of every track would continue in escalation. This one looked like it was going to, but then didn't. We'll get to that in a second, though. The first half of this is absolutely gorgeous. The piano continues on. I love to see it having a stronger focus here. We heard a little bit of it on Will, and it's nice to have it in full force here in a very light, almost, I don't think there's any drums in the first couple of minutes. We have the clean vocals, we have the piano, we have a very light guitar and some sick bass work. As the song gets further and further into itself, the bass part becomes more and more complex, really leading the song, pushing it forward as counterpoint to the clean vocals. Absolutely love all of that. And it's just incredibly effective at creating beauty, not like we've seen previously, which was a type of melancholic beauty. This one really aimed for consonance. It wanted to find a joy. And I think it does, because we do have the twists. About 3 minutes into this track, we have rising escalation, primarily with the vocals, although we have some guitar feedback showing up for one bar before the guitar comes in, and we have this big noisy finale. Up to this point, though, the vocals are rising in tension. It almost sounds as if they're becoming more anxious. Their pitch is rising up. It feels like they're kind of compressing in a little bit. There's raspiness working its way into it. The volume is increasing. It's certainly doing a fantastic job of making it feel more intense. And then when the feedback kicks in from the guitar that's off in the distance, you know it's about to erupt. This is the back half of the track, and the vocals continue their push towards escalation. The guitars are noise, the bass is fluctuating between more melodically driven sections and just filling out the low end. Honestly, it gets overshadowed by a lot of the guitar stuff popping up in here. And I'm going to be completely honest too, a lot of this section, my ears went towards the vocals. I didn't know what they were saying. I don't speak Japanese, but I could feel every bit of this. And the vocals begin to crack, pushing into the fry scream, but we never get it. And I think this is genius for an album that has consistently sat on this type of vocal delivery to both lean on for its most aggressive moments, but to also be the linchpin for every peak of this album. It never actually went for it. We got 1 or 2 syllables with extra bit of rasp that I might say, sure, maybe we had some true fry screaming going on, but we brought it back down. Went back towards that heightened, clean speech. What I found interesting is that there's a violin going on in here as well. And the violin is peaceful. Its timbre, of course, is warm, as violins are, but if you listen to the notes it's playing in its melody, it's also bringing about peace or maybe a type of acceptance into this. It's kind of piercing all of the noise and chaos that the guitar is bringing, the anxiety that the vocals are delivering on, and trying to, I don't know, manage it, to bring it down. And it does. The vocals were about to peak, crack over into the screaming, and do what every track has done so far, and it doesn't. It comes down, the pitch comes down too. The volume and intensity drops, and eventually even the noisy guitars start to waver and flicker out too. It still ends on a not great atmosphere. Still a bit filthy, still a bit noisy, but well, it's been walked back from the edge. Maybe this track is about taking a step in a healthier direction. And when you feel that you're about to fall into a trap you've fallen into before, to set forth on a vicious cycle again, you decide just to step off that path, to not fall for the trap and to try something different. And I think that's what the violin represents here. It is the voice that causes the entire song to shirk back from spiraling out of control in the same ways it has done multiple times over. And so while I feel like sonically it's kind of a letdown to not get that final explosive moment, to hear the album reach its most climactic peak in the final track, it feels good. Maybe a bit anticlimactic, but thematically resolved, and makes me hopeful for our narrator. Again, I don't know if this is a concept album. I don't even know if what I'm talking about is actually going to show up in the lyrics, but musically, this is the story I'm feeling here. And when I pair that to every other track on this album, it paints a very clear picture to me. Someone spiraling out of control in their life, reaching further and further manic extremes until finally they decide to take a step away from that. It doesn't fix everything. It's not sugar drops and lollipops at the end of this track, at the end of the album, but it's certainly better than it's been in the past. Sometimes it's the thing you gotta do, is just one step, and that's gonna avalanche into something better. Let's see if the lyrics line up with any of these reads I have. Well, not quite what I had anticipated. This is generally a happier song than any of the others we've explored, but I don't think it's necessarily about taking the step to improve one's life. It says, I only know the songs I've been given. The hands of an old clock teach me about the flow of life. I sweep it away. The forest covers the boredom. It's okay if you forget the shape of the door to the beginning, because you are beautiful. Let your heart twinkle, and you can sing any time. Wearing a crown of white flowers, the girl with rosy cheeks easily turned the stiff doorknob, and she found me. I like this. We have some concepts here. Doors being metaphors for decisions or options. And it says it's okay if you forget the shape of the door to the beginning, to forget the way to how things started. A life is a series of doors. Some of them are ones you get to choose, and others are ones that are forced upon you, as we explored in the track Home. I think it was, maybe it was Stray Sheep, where they expressed their feeling of being held to the whims of fate, that they didn't have any control in their life. Being forced to go through doors shows up here and ties us back to that one. Now, it also says that the girl with the crown of white flowers, this goes back to track 3's Water Lily, which is a white flower and was referenced in that track too. It says, she easily turned the stiff doorknob and found me. It's okay if you go through many doors you can't choose. You are strong. Let your heart twinkle and you can still sing. Life may not be fair for everyone. You may not even have a lot of control over life, but you have control over yourself, over your emotions, over how you respond to your environment. In this case, you need to have love in your heart that allows you to sing, to self-express. Find positive joys in life, even if you don't get to make a lot of decisions within it. This is, in a lot of ways, an acceptance of one's state, of one's environment. I did mention that acceptance was a vibe I got from this. I can't remember if it was this track or last track, but I brought up this idea of acceptance within the music. And I love that we're seeing it here. Again, it's not about course correcting and seeing immediate change, but about making small changes, knowing they're going to add up. And this is a simple perspective shift. Here, though, things change a little bit. The very next line is, I loaded a bullet. I thought I was resisting just by loading it, but I couldn't do anything. I found peace watching the butterfly being eaten by a spider. There's nowhere to go. Losing my face, everyone clings to a god that's nothing more than an empty shell. I couldn't remain a child, of course, but I can't become an adult either. I met you, and you picked me up, connected me piece by piece, and I confirmed that I was here. I loaded a bullet and I fired. The sky was vast, the contrails stretched long, and I was scared and happy that I could go anywhere. Just the two of us met, and it's okay if we forget the shape of the door that started it all. It's okay to go through so many doors that we can't choose because I met you. And if we part and meet again, I will sing the songs that I learned. I think this is interesting. I purposefully withheld this ending when I stopped in the middle to talk about things, because it is an acceptance of life, but only because of the destination. And I find this more tragic than anything else. It is gorgeous in one way. The romantic in me really wants to adore this. The main character finds purpose in life through another. But also, they found purpose in life through another. They still don't have the self-care and the self-preservation needed. They don't have a strong sense of self at all. They still find death too enticing compared to a bland life. It is only because they lucked upon a relationship that may not even be permanent that gives them a reason to live, and that is depressing. I think that's a lot of what this song is aiming for. There is an acceptance, but there's also still a really strong sense of melancholy in this track. It is gorgeous and one of the most consonant tracks up until it isn't. Up until the part where they talk about feeling lost and finding someone who puts them together, and now they're happy that they're together, and this is all during the escalation, this is all during the noise. When I read it out loud, it gets to a point where it's overwhelmingly romantic. There's a beauty in the love of this, but the atmosphere doesn't let you feel that. Musically, it tells you this is still noisy, this is still bad. And I agree with that. There is a desperation to this. But again, it's also very human too. We're not looking at a flawless character who's designed to be perfect in every way. We're looking at someone who has had a really rough life and is finding something to bring them joy. The unfortunate part is that something is someone, and hopefully they can work that out, but if they don't, The narrator says if we part, we will meet again. There's an obsession here because of a reliance. At this point, anyways, our narrator can't find purpose in life through themselves. And so it is joyful, it is romantic. It's kind of a sappy ending here. But there's also still tragedy in it. There's still growth left for our narrator to have. It leaves the song, this album, this story off on a cliffhanger, as any good story will. Leaves it up to the imagination of the viewer to figure out what happens next. At least for me, I hope that our narrator learns to love themselves and can be their own rock. But the music leaves it ambiguous. Or at least these are my thoughts on Awake, Children Under the Moon by Cissné. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, is a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.